great to see so many interested faces in learning about Auburn Leathercrafters and our 75 years of history. One thing about putting together a presentation like this, you know, we're telling the story not only about our business, we're telling the story about our family. Because my grandparents started this business back in 1950, and I'd like to point out some of my kin folk that are here tonight. Al's wife, Anita, is in the back, and did Christopher come?
He should be walking through the door anytime.
No, Christopher's coming. My niece Zoe and her husband Rick are here from Minnesota. And Al and Anita's daughter Laura is here. And my wife Kim is here with my nieces. And
Byron and Sue.
Byron and Sue, yes. Byron and Sue, I forgot about them. But most of the family members have spent production times at Auburn Leathercrafters, correct?
Everybody.
Just about everybody in some shape or form. Whether it was pushing a broom after school or putting on buckles when I was a grade schooler during the summer months. We've all put in time doing work at Auburn Leathercrafters. How many people here have a pet at home? A dog, a cat, a ferret? Anything that I can put a cow on, or use a leaf. So if you go to our website, you'll see it talks on the homepage of our website about our philosophy. And basically, Auburn Leathercrafters is all about quality and value. So what we do is not to be the cheapest guy on the block. Sometimes we're the most expensive thing on the block, but that's okay. That's what we're about. So we're here to tell you that, you know, our family business started in 1950, and we've been right here in Auburn since day one. And it's been 4 generations of our family. It started with our grandparents, Everett and Alice, commonly known as Peggy, and who started the business. And one employee, we'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. And over the years, when my parents got married in 1951, was it 1951? November 1950, the same year as the business. Shortly thereafter, my dad started working for the business as a salesman. And I got involved in the business when I graduated from college, after working part-time in the shop through my school years. And now the business is in the hands of my brother Alan and his wife Anita, and my nephew Christopher. And Laura's also involved in the business. She does a lot of the technical IT technology things and the artwork for the business. So a lot of people of the family are still involved in the business. So again, it's been 75 years as of July 10th. So in this photograph are my nephew Christopher, Anita, my brother Walter, myself, and my brother Alan. And we're standing over the biggest table in the building where hides are laid out in preparation for making things into dog collars. So our business now is comprised of like 5 different brands of product. And Auburn Leathercrafters is the oldest label in our wheelhouse. And a few years ago, we introduced a brand called A Tail We Could Wag, Retrieve Life. And that has a real interesting backstory. We'll get into these a little bit more as we go along. We not only use leather in our products, but we use some man-made materials called biopane. And we make a couple brands of product with the biopane, and that falls into the category of Sparky's Collection. And a couple of years ago, we acquired fully a brand we were making for another company. It's called Upland and Downstream. And you'll hear stories about each of these as we go along. So again, my full-time work with the business got started in about 1975, and this was the catalog cover that we're using back in the day. And it features artwork that my mother created with the sleeping dog, the lazy dog. And so the tagline, you'll see, do I have my laser turned on yet? So you'll see over here, right in here, in quotations, smart dog attire. And so there was signage around the business when it was up on Franklin Street back in the 1950s and 1960s, and there were these little signs around the office. And I thought smart dog, I thought attire was the name of the dog. I didn't know what attire meant at 6, 7, 8 years old. So I thought it was the name of a dog. I said, who would name their dog attire? So how did this business get started? Well, back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, our grandfather had a variety of different sales jobs, and I know that he worked for, in the petroleum business. He was a sales rep for some of the oil companies in upstate New York. And there's a photograph, Byron can speak to that a little bit, but there's a photograph of him when there was an airfield out in the town of Wasco, right? No, where was the airfield? Truth. In the town of Truth. And he's sold the oil, he's made business arrangements for his oil products to be used to fuel the airplanes at this airport. And then he's on the back of a plane or in the back of a truck, and they're pumping gas or fuel into the airplanes. That's what I remember about that. But what I really remember about Grandpa is that he worked for a company called Bastion Brothers. And I'll show you a slide in that in a minute. But anyhow, Grandpa had a real business intuition. He was an entrepreneur. And he had the natural aspiration of people in that business. And he said, well, if I could make money for Joe Doe's, I can make money for me. So the story, so this is actually just a little, it's about this big, but it's blotter paper. And as a advertising handout to customers or prospective customers, this is kind of like his business card. And it had examples of all the different things that Grandpa was selling. So it was in the advertising business. They would use bronze and other materials to make plaques and letter openers and keychains and name badges and things like that. And he was all over Central New York selling these products. And I remember a story Dad told me about. This was during World War II, and Dad was a young middle-aged teenager at the time. And they went up to Oswego, New York, to Fort Ontario, which was a military base at the time. And apparently Grandpa had to go up there because he needed to take orders for new security name badges. And so about 15, no, it's longer than that, 30 years ago, when our kids were in their early teens, we were up at Fort Ontario. And in one of the display cases is that there's old artifacts on one side and the new artifacts on this side. And in the display case, there's one of my grandfather's embossed calendar cards. So on one side was like his business card, Everett Dungey, 109 North Street, and on the flip side was the calendar card for like 1949. Or whatever World War II year it was, I don't remember that. So one day, while soliciting business right here in Auburn, New York, Grandpa was in the Simplex manufacturing facility trying to get some new business. And of course, course, he knew the Metcalf family. So the story goes, he was talking with Mr. Merritt, he says, I hear you're getting into dog collars. How's it going? And Mr. Merritt goes, lousy, I'm gonna sell it. Maybe you'd like to buy it. And my grandfather said, maybe I would. Well, about 2 weeks later, he was in business for himself. So they sold some property, and they mortgaged a few things, and they took out some loans, and they got themselves into business. So here's the county clerk's record of the assigning of the assumed business name, Auburn Leathercrafters, July 10th, 1950. And there's other documents about the acquisition of the business, including documents like this, that one is a release of creditors, so you don't want to take on any debt that the previous owner had. So there's documents to that effect. And the document on the right is basically a list of the assets that are being acquired, machinery and raw materials. And of course, also when you get into new business, you have to start developing relationships with your suppliers. So had to make arrangements and business relationships with the tanneries that provided the raw materials. You had to do business with manufacturers of metal products that would make the D-rings and buckles and rivets and other materials. You had to acquire additional equipment or parts for equipment, and thread for the sewing machines and such, needles for the sewing machines. So you had to do all this kind of work, and there's documentation in our records about some of those efforts. So a few months back in April, I got to meet for the first time Miss Joanne Tardamone Christiantelli. And my wife Kim knows Joanne because she worked in the Boyle Center building for the Office of the Aging, and Joanne would keep coming by and says, I gotta come down to your shop one of these days. I used to work for your husband's grandfather. And I was like, I don't know. She did. So anyhow, Joe and her son stopped down at the business this April, and we gave her a tour of the business. But Joe was the first employee of my grandfather. Now, it started out, Grandpa would make products on the weekends, and he'd go out to retailers during the week and sell the product, one customer at a time, a few items here, a few items there. And as he started growing a little bit more business, he said, I need help. So Joe was the first employee. And they were working out of a building which I believe is in the neighborhood of where Play Space is, where that little strip plaza is, where the A&P store used to be back in our childhoods. So it was in a building called Hubbard Press on the second floor. And it's kind of in the backyard of where the seminary buildings used to be. The theological seminary buildings used to be. So as the business grew, this is the building I remember first where Auburn Leathercrafters was located, and that was up on 78 Franklin Street. Who knows where Tinker's Guild is?
The original building.
That's the site of where the original three-story wood frame building was. And like I say, I used to go up there for some time during the summer, get out of the house, go with your dad, go do something useful. And so this is where we were located. So the sad thing about this building is that there was a fire there about 15, 20 years ago. And so Friday night, and my brothers, I've got 5 brothers, and every once in a while somebody would say, hey, we haven't seen each other in a while, let's get together, let's go out for a beer. Let's go to Tinker's. Great, I haven't been in Tinker's since we moved from Franklin Street down to where we are now on Washington Street. So we're up at Tinker's on Friday night, having some beers, and we're talking with John Mortimer, the owner. And we're saying, yep, over in that corner is where Grandma's and Grandpa's office was, and over here was where the strap covers and the leather shear was, and over here was where the assembly and the riveting machines were. We remembered the layout of the building. We should get you some photographs of like these, and you can put them up in the establishment. Tell people a little backstory about the building. 2 days later, I'm driving back into town. Early morning fire destroys Tinker's Tavern. What? What? I was just in there for the first time in 50 years. Friday night.
Paul, who's in the photograph?
So reaching up into the file drawer, that's my grandmother, Alice, Peggy. And in the back, I believe that's Lorraine Gagne. Now, Lorraine Gagne was like family. She worked for the business as long as I can remember, and she lived in the apartment upstairs from in my grandparents' house from the day they got married to the day they died. And so they were like family. So Grandpa had a philosophy about starting the business, and it goes like that. There's hardly anything in the world that someone cannot make a little worse and a little cheaper, and the people who consider price alone are this man's lawful prey. So there's always somebody out there who can make something faster and cheaper, but that's not the Auburn way. So again, from the first building on Hubbard Street to Franklin Street, this is kind of the layout. There were machines in here that cut the big hides down into manageable squares. There was a machine, you'll see a little picture of it later, that you would run it through and it would cut the big square down into long straps. There are machines in here that would be used to put edge stain on the edge of the collars and all that kind of stuff. These are some of the early riveting machines that you would use to fold over the ends of the collar and when the buckles were put on and fasten the ends. So I can still smell and see all these things in my mind's eye. And so operating a machine that would cut the round ends and punch the holes. That's Al Peczkowski working at what's called the clicker. If you can see on the wall, there are these framed dies, and they would be used to stamp out from larger pieces of leather. And most of those dies that I see hanging there are for things like axe sheaths and hammer holders. And that's Tom Felicio, who's at one of the sewing machines, the Bosworth Campbell sewing machine. Campbell Bosworth. See, that's the other thing about telling family history, is that everybody's got a different memory or a different outlook, or said, that's not what Grandpa said. So the other parts of developing a business from scratch is you've got to develop the market. And so that takes printing a catalog, developing a product, deciding what your product line is going to look like, and then developing product catalogs. And then you got to take it out into the marketplace. So they went to a lot of trade shows, and turns out that a big part of our business from the get-go was hardware stores, feed stores, places like Agway and the GLF stores. There weren't a lot of pet stores back in the day, but in town you had places like Knight's Pet Farm. And of course, you had veterinary offices and groomers and places like that. You might have had some department stores, but a big part of our business was in hardware stores. And back in the day, most of these, they put together an assortment on a board. And you'd walk into the store and said, I can sell you this small assortment of collars for $100. whatever, probably not even that much back in the
Much
day,
less.
probably more like $25.
They were selling collars by the dozen for less than we sell it, one collar today.
And there's Grandpa Everett at one of the trade shows. Sad part of it is, I can kind of guess the time frame, but I had no idea where the location of it was.
That was in Syracuse at the New York State Hardware Association meeting.
So as the business grew, Grandpa started taking on salespeople. And so, you can see from the lineup here, our dad, Gordon, Ralph Rogers, who lived in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and he covered eastern New York State and Massachusetts. Rod Buck was our central New York man. Bill Holohan covered from like Rochester West. And Marty Harris worked the Philadelphia area, Allentown. And Walter, he was all over, over the years. He was down in Pennsylvania for a long time, he was up in New England states after Ralph retired. Funny story, you know, it was almost like Uncle Ralph. He even came to our parents' 50th wedding anniversary. So again, this is a picture, a print that's been hanging in the office since Grandpa held the office. This is a piece from Dun and Bradstreet, and I think it's pretty relevant to our business. On the back of it says, the old peddler, once a mainstay of distribution in the United States, knew that important fact: you can't do business from an empty wagon. His wagon creaked under the weight of housewares as he started out on Monday and rattled home empty on Saturday. That was the life of our dad for many years. He'd go out on Monday morning and we wouldn't see him until Friday night. Knowing where to go and whom to sell at a profit is still a fundamental sales and credit principle. Profits are made on goods sold and delivered. Profits are made on merchandise purchased and consumed. Profits are made on a confident approach to a market. Pinch penny buying of a dozen when a gross is needed is wasteful and expensive to the manufacturer, distributor, and consumer alike. Empty shelves create suspicion of fear. Full stocks of fresh merchandise stimulate confidence. Selectivity invites attention and action. Inventories are dangerous when they are the result of wrong selection or poor timing. But good management means sufficient stock to meet the daily and seasonal needs. Buy wisely and confidently. Buy your known requirements and benefit by established quantity discounts. Act as if you know where you are going to be in business this year, next year, and the year after that. Stock and sell. Don't let dust gather on empty shelves. You can't make a profit without a sale. Boy, did I have that message beat into my head year after year after year. You can't sell from an empty wagon. Sell the whole line. That was the other side of the equation. You gotta have a full wagon, but you gotta sell it too. Back in the day, before cell phones and email and all the modern conveniences, communications went out to the salespeople in a weekly mail packet. And they'd often be filled with little things like this. Memorandum. Quality is like buying oats. If you want nice, clean, fresh oats, you have to pay a little bit for them at a fair price. However, if you can be satisfied with oats that have been already through the horse, that comes a little cheaper. Signed right from the horse's mouth. Other things went out in the mail, like this flyer from the Humane Association. This is a leash. It's a birth control device. It's the best way to keep your dog from getting injured. It's the best good neighbor policy maker. It's the best identification service as the license attached to the collar will get your pet back to you if the pet should be lost. It's the best wildlife and environmental protection. It's the best way to develop an affectionate pet. It's also the best crime prevention device, because when the leash is not in use, then your pet will be at home overseeing matters and protecting the family. Use it. Keep your dog leashed as a habit and as a matter of civic practice. I think those rules still apply. Auburn Leathercrafters in the news. Even from the earliest days, things would be happening in our business that would become newsworthy. And one of the first things that I can find evidence of is the development, you know, hold that up and pass it around, Alan, of not only leather, but a new 3M Scotch-Lite product called Scotch-Lite. And it was stone onto the surface of the collars to be reflective. So when you're out walking your dog in the dark, headlights and other things would reflect off of that, it would be safe. So somehow Arthur Godfrey got wind of this and publicized it on his TV show. And then it made the news regionally. Auburn got involved with various trade associations, and the International Management Club, on the 10th year of the anniversary, talked about how in June, celebrating the anniversary, the 10th anniversary, you know, again, it started out with Everett, with one girl employee, and has grown to a sales force of 4 exclusive salesmen. Our salespeople worked exclusively for us. They weren't manufacturers representatives for a whole bunch of companies. They made a living from our product. And back in the early 1960s, they'd grown from grandpa going out store to store right here in Central New York, the sales markets all through the New England states. And again, 85% of our sales came from hardware. Another thing that you might remember is that Auburn Leathercrafters was like the first business, or practically the only business that I can know of around here that implemented a 4-day work week. So, and I don't know what made Dad itch to do this, whether it was because he had a camp up in the Adirondacks and wanted a long weekend, or just because he thought it was efficient. I don't know, you can flip a coin on that. But the employees really bought into it. So yes, they had to work an extra 2 hours instead of going home at like 3 o'clock. They were coming in at like, what do they do now?
Well, 5:30 now.
So it's like 7
to 5:30.
7 to 5:30, 4 days a week. And then they got Fridays, they got a 3-day weekend every week. They love it.
Can never change that back.
And so these are just some pictures of a few of our employees over the years. Karen in the white still works for us. But operating sewing machines, and that the orange machine runs on air pressure hydraulics. Hydraulics. But instead of having multiple punch operations for cutting the ends of the collars and the round ends and the holes and all that kind of stuff, you set it up and you can do as many collars as you want with that pattern all day long. So again, this is the one ad that ran at the introduction of the 4-day work week. Back in 1971, when I was a junior in high school. So again, that's the big table where you lay out full sides of leather, and that's one of the other die cutting machines. And again, this machine on the left is the strap cutter, so you can see the top roller underneath that is a set of rollers that has round circular blades. And they're spaced 1 inch, inch and a half, 3/4 inch, half inch, whatever width of the strap, and however long you need it. You need a 20-inch collar, or you need a 6-foot leash, you just run a big piece of leather through there and it cuts it down into the straps. And then those die cutting machines, they use all these different ends. Do you want a round point, a round end, a pointed end, a square end? How many holes does it need? And so, you know, how does a business operate? Well, you gotta contact the customers, you gotta take the orders, you gotta invoice the orders, you gotta, you know, prepare a packing list and all that kind of stuff. Somebody's gotta do desk work. Somebody's gotta manage all the inventory. Look at all the different color dyes that are part of the inventory. Somebody's gotta keep track of that and then order it. And of course, Alan and Anita's dogs are on the shop every day. So there's Abe, the black dog, and Baxter, the white dog. And they are a mix of Schnauzer poodle and Saint Bernard poodle. They're big dogs. And if you come down to the shop, call first, because you gotta put the dogs in a pen. And then, of course, it's just managing the flow of inventory. Another piece of history is, how many people remember the Dunn and McCarthy fire in 1993? So basically, that was the December 19th, it was like a week before Christmas, on a Sunday night. And my brother Walter was down at the office at Washington Street. He was getting stuff together, we were getting ready to go on a business trip. He goes, a fire truck just pulled out here in the lane out in front of the building. I'm gonna go out and see what they're up to. And they never called me back. I had a fire scanner, and I'm hearing every volunteer fire company from the county being called out, and to Dunn and McCarthy. And so I picked up my brother Byron, who lived on East Genesee Street, and we're heading down East Genesee Street Hill, and it looks like the whole west end of Auburn is on fire. And it was a horrendous night. Of course, the Dunn and McCarthy building was empty. They ceased operation years before the fire, but the fire jumped across the street. And, you know, all the surrounding neighborhoods were in fear. And so you can see in the left on this picture are the skeleton remains of the Dunn and McCarthy building, and it's jumped across the street to the Max Studio building and the P&R Rossi, Bursino Rossi building across the street. And we're behind those buildings. And if the fire truck had retreated from the heat of the fire back alongside of our building, we might have gone too.
Most definitely.
It was that close. So you can see the aerial view of the skeletal remains. So we were biting our fingernails, and we were standing next to our insurance agent, Charlie Adams, Adams Family Insurance, and boys, we got you covered, one way or the other. So how many people know this story? You want to tell this one, Alan?
Sure. So, the dog boots. The day that they arrested Timothy McVeigh, I'm in their shipping department backing some orders up, and I got a phone call. I thought it was a prank call at first. It was the wife of a veterinarian from Oklahoma City who was caring for the search and rescue dogs. And just so happened that one of our customers in Oklahoma City had some of our dog boots and had donated them to the rescue dogs. and they discovered that they worked great, and she was calling up to basically say, can you send more? So it's an item that we don't really keep a lot of inventory of, and we actually had to make the inventories. And so our UPS driver shows up to pick up our daily shipments, and he makes a call to Syracuse and says, this is what's going on, and UPS held a plane in Syracuse. We made the boots, the driver drove them right to the airport, and they flew them out, and they had them the next morning. And so we made like 25, 30 sets. And years later, again, our friend Charlie Adams was at an insurance conference, and he knew an agent from Oklahoma City, and delivered to that agent from Oklahoma City was a thank you letter from the governor of Oklahoma, and a book written on the whole ordeal of the Merle building that went down. And anyways, it was kind of neat. And then move forward to 2011, with the World Trade Center, and I get a phone call from my friends at the Adams Insurance again. So, you guys are going to have to make more dog boots. This is before the second tower even came down.
Yeah.
And so we started making some, and then we're trying to figure out how do we get them there, because the whole city was shut down at that point. And so what ended up happening was the New York State Police took them from Auburn to Binghamton. Binghamton Police took them from Binghamton to Middletown, and Middletown drove them right down and delivered them to the firefighters and the rescue people in whatever their headquarters were at the time. And we never even were sure that they made it and got used until years later. A friend of ours was at the History Museum in Albany, and there's a 9/11 exhibit down there, and our dog boots are on display. So anyways, it was something that we were happy and proud to be able to do, what anybody would do, to help. So anyway, that's the story behind the dog boots.
Yeah, so if you go to the New York State History Museum and by the Big Egg in downtown Albany, they're on permanent display.
Did the dogs, did you have 4 boots or just?
Yeah, 4 boots. We sell them in sets of 4. Yeah.
You'll see there's a set of them going around in circulation. One done up with 3 more boots behind it that you put on, yep. And again, we got thank you letters from even the Cuyahoga County Search and Rescue took a team of dogs down and they wore our boots.
In fact, they're part of a recommended item that FEMA puts out is a ready bag that any dog handler that is going to go out and do search and rescue work, it suggested that they have a set of our boots in their ready bag.
So now there's Christopher and Ian working one of the presses at the shop. And of course, it always helps to have some local recognition. So this is a letter from Senator Nozzolio. We had been recognized in a pet trade magazine with products that came into the Retailer's Choice Award category. So we were recognized for that. And there's who likes jingle bells for Christmas? We have dog collars and leashes with jingle bells. And cat collars. And of course, our own Gary Finch gave Ellen and Anita recognition through the Small Business of the Year Award in 2014. As much as we're squawking about them tonight, even the county legislature did. So So Grandma and Grandpa started the business in 1950. You know, my dad and my grandmother ran the business. My grandfather died when I was in 3rd grade, so I was pretty young. And that was in the early 60s, not 1962. 1963. And so my dad, Gordon, and my grandmother Peggy ran the business up until the years where Alan and Anita acquired the business. And you've been doing that since 2005?
That's all I've ever done, but we bought the business out.
All right, so Alan's gonna do a little product show and tell, and I'm gonna start it with telling you about one of our products in the Auburn Leathercrafters line made with Tuscan Italian leather.
You did show gloves, you made gloves with.
No, we resold it back when we were supplying all the hardware stores. We purchased and resold quite a few things. It's all right if they don't work off, we'll just talk through it. So we have a YouTube channel, and it has a number of videos that, my friend Jeff DiGilizzi, who lives in Florida now, but he and his son have a marketing company, they make these videos for us.
Your cell phone number?
Yeah, there it is, just take a bit. So there's a whole number of videos, if you were to go to our website, you can see, there's one on every product line. And, anyways, are we done now, Paul? Where are you at?
Well, there's,
No, you don't need to play all the videos.
then you go. You're in.
All right, so over the years, different things that we have done, there's a guide dog foundation down in Long Island, and we've been making guide dog harnesses and leashes for them specifically for 40 some odd years. And so it's got reflectivity, it's got rigid handles, it also has a soft handle, and it's built to their specifications. Other crazy things that we've gotten into. This funny looking item is a bird aging station, basically for a small game hunter. And my brother Walter, who was a sales rep in New England at the time, called on Orvis. And in his bag of samples, there was a hammer holder. And the guy said, had just come from a hunting excursion in France. And he had game that was basically aged. They would come back with a pheasant or a rabbit, and they would have the animal in the noose, and it would be hanging from his belt, and they would come back to the cabin, and this would be hanging on the outside of the cabin, and they would basically let the birds age for a few days before they cooked them. Not something that was well thought of in the U.S. as it turns out, because Orvis ordered a couple hundred of these things, and the buyer for Orvis ended up losing his job over it because they never sold more than 2 or 3 of them. But anyways, they held up the press for the catalog, and got pictured in their catalog like this in the bottom left-hand corner there, and anyways, they held up the catalog to get the photograph taken, and so that was just one of those funny things that we did for Orvis. Other things that we've done over the years, if anybody has the old bear paw, like snowshoe, wooden frames with the rawhide lattice in between the wooden frame. So we made thousands of these made out of conveyor belting. It's a snowshoe binding to use on the old snowshoes. And both Orvis and L.L. Bean sold them, and this company that we made them for is the Vermont Cubs company that made the actual snowshoes. Back in, I look at my note and see what year it was. So in 1987, I think most of you guys might remember, Reagan was in France, or in Germany, and speaking about tearing down the wall. And so he says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, right? And there was an Associated Press photographer taking photographs of the event, and he was wearing a camera strap made by this company, Donkey. And the camera strap broke, and the camera dropped to the ground, and the film came out of the camera, and he lost his pictures of that event. And the people at Donkey caught an earful. Well, that's how we ended up making Donkey camera straps. The last guy that made the camera straps lost the business to us. And we continue to make their camera straps today. And back in, it would have been in 97, Canon Camera introduced the Rebel camera and what they call the Power Shot camera. And Canon included one of the camera straps that we make for Donkey in with every camera sold. So that year, or over the next 2 or 3 years, we made close to 80,000 camera straps that went with Canon cameras. And so anyways, today we are making quite a few less. You know, we might make a couple thousand a year, but we still make camera straps for the Donkey company. The other things that we do, besides dog collars and leashes. So this is an old handle off of an old tube amplifier, a Fender guitar amplifier. And there's 2 or 3 companies out there that do restoration of those old amplifiers. And we make replacement handles. And so this is our replacement of the old Fender style handle. And so we make handles that go, on items like that. We make handles that are used on the old steamer trunks. I learned tonight that out here in the museum, there's a couple of Model T or Model A Fords. We make restoration parts for the old Model Ts for a company in Ohio, but we make every, hood corners for the leather corners that go to keep the hood from rattling. We make straps to hold the mirror on, straps to hold the roof up and down, and all different kind of consumable components that will wear out that go on the old Model Ts. Other things that we do.
So would you make a strap for an individual customer, or they would have to buy it from?
Well, if you're talking like if you had a Model T Ford and you wanted the replacement part, you would have to go to my customer. Snyder's Antique Auto Parts is who we make them for.
I'm thinking like an old steamer trunk.
Right. No, we have some inventory of those kinds of things. So if you wanted to buy a handle or a trunk strap, we can do that. Yeah. This here is an old fishing grill harness. The old fly fisherman would carry this on his hip. And if he caught a fish, this is how we would carry his fish. And so there's a company in Colorado called Stone Creek that makes fly fishing gear. And for them, we make the leather harness and the latch kit that goes on the fishing grill. And so through them, our products ended up in L.L. Bean, Orvis, Cabela's, Bass Pros, and different stores that would carry fly fishing gear. And we would private label for all those different companies. And, let's see, what else? Different things that come up over the years. Just a couple of years ago, there was a movie company out of New York City that made a movie called Infinity Pool. And,
Anybody see it?
huh?
Anybody see it?
I didn't even see the movie, but there was a dog, an attack dog or something in the movie, and it was a big part of the movie. And at the movie release, the red carpet movie release, or what they call it, the premiere of the movie, they ordered a number of dog collars and leashes to be given out to all the high rollers that came to the premiere of the movie. So it has the name of the movie on it, and we made a bunch of those for that purpose. Over here, and you guys are all welcome to come up and look at some of these things later on. Maybe some of you know the TC Timber Company over at Skaneateles, make the wooden toys. So they, for a number of years, had an arrangement with Stickley Furniture where they used scrap lumber from Stickley and they made doll-size Stickley furniture. And we made the leather seats. So, and then Mackenzie Childs over in Aurora, we made, this is what they would put their, they had postcard size, well, actually did postcards, but the postcards were their catalog. And so for all their retail dealers that resold the Mackenzie Childs products, they got a box like this where we put the strap on it for them, and it was full of postcards of all the different Mackenzie products. And so this was something that we did for them. And Victoria and Richard, when they still owned the company, we were right in the midst of building a whole line of collars and leashes that were going to be branded Mackenzie Childs. And these are some of the designs
Pass them around.
that Victoria and I worked on. And anyways, they ended up going bankrupt and sold the company to Pleasant Roll, right about the time we had the designs down. So it never actually came to market. But these are some of the designs. So other fun things that come up. So I had a phone call from this very eccentric woman from New Jersey, whose name was Bunny Brogdon. I'll never forget the name, it was a very odd name. And she had a picture of a collar made with badger fur trim, and asked me if I could make a replica of it. And the picture was like from the Victorian era. It was a black and white photograph, and I was like, geez, I don't even know where to find badger fur, but you do a Google search, you can find it, believe it or not. So I ended up making, I don't know, 100 or 150 of these collars. It's got badger fur trim with studs on it, and it was for French bulldogs. And anyways, this is worn by the dog, and it basically looked pretty sharp on the dog's neck. And anyways, a fun little project that we did. So the brand name, A Tail We Could Wag, the fabrics are all hand woven in Guatemala. This is a company that we acquired 2015? 17. And anyways, the product, the company was formed by a lady who was a missionary as a teenager in Guatemala during their civil war. And she witnessed a lot of single mothers who were living in very remote areas that had no way to raise their kids. The male population had basically been wiped out in the war. It was like a genocide. Anybody that was a fighting age, there were no males. And so the women were trying to find ways to raise their family and earn a living. And she saw the beautiful weavings that they did and figured I can do something with it. And she created this A Tail We Could Wag company, which was a line of collars, leashes, and belts. And I never met the woman who started the company, but the the people that we bought the company from in 2015 was Joe Ryan. He had products made, the fabric woven in Guatemala, and he was making products in Boise, Idaho. And he was using home labor to do the assembly of the finished product. And anyways, he approached me to make the product line for him, and I ended up buying the company with my wife and my son. And so we continue to use the hand-woven fabrics from Guatemala. They do some beautiful weavings, and we make belts, dog collars and leashes. We've just introduced camera straps, binocular straps. And we also are making hat bands. So if you have a Western style hat, we have hat bands. And we sell these all across the country and on our website. And we are happy to employ 35 weavers that work out of their home in Guatemala.
And there's some pictures.
Yeah. This is the kind of loom that they weave on. And my daughter Laura and I went down, she translated, and we met the weavers, and we had the pleasure to take 35 weavers to lunch in Guatemala. And we learned that many of them have never even been to a restaurant before. So, no, they weave the fabric, and we bring the fabric, the upper layer of this is just the colorful portion is what they're doing. And we buy that in rolls that they ship to us from Guatemala. And then we cut to length and sew it into collars and belts and whatnot in our shop in Auburn.
There's about, how many patterns? About 50?
Pretty close to 50, yeah, we keep adding to it. Yeah.
Sounds like for most of these women, it's their only income.
Yeah, and it is their only income for many of them.
So what's the material that they're, what kind of yarn?
It's cotton.
It's cotton.
It's all hand dyed and it's color fast. It'll, the colors will fade like blue jeans might fade, over time, but the color will not bleed out. It's pretty color fast. And,
Oh, could you pass the belt around?
I'm sure. So if anybody desires a belt, we make leather belts, we also make this fabric belts, and we have in sizes from 28 to 58. Let's see, besides that, Paul mentioned the Sparky's Choice line of collars, which is made out of a biothane. This material is made in Ohio. It's a coated nylon, so it's really strong, but it's waterproof and it's odor resistant, and great for dogs that are in and out of ponds or pools or salt water, and easy to clean, soap and water cleanup. And again, 100% made in the U.S. And if you got that video, it'd be good to play. Yeah, that one right there. You just have back it up one.
No.
Yeah, not that one. The range day.
Look through it. Being stubborn on it.
It seems like you take your core.
Has anybody ever called you with an idea and you said, no, not making that?
Well, it's kind of funny, back when we started making the camera straps, my father was still owner and operating the business at that point, and he was kind of resistant to getting out of the pet business at all.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's business, let's try.
Yeah.
And anyways, that was one of the first things that we started making besides the pet products. But yeah, the opportunity arises as long as it's something that's in our wheelhouse, and as long as it's something we can make a profit on, as long as it's not something that anybody would question the integrity of us or we've had people come and look for some questionable items we made in the past. Leather. Yeah, anyway. So this demonstrates the waterproof and all that. That was filmed right over in Fleming. Our friend Fred Horning and his old Chevy truck. So Fred, the fun story about Fred is he breeds those chocolate labs, and he will raise them and train them for autistic people, and he donates to you know he donates the dogs and all of his training to the family that adopts the dog and becomes a service dog for an autistic child. And we've always told Fred, I said, anytime you do that, we'll provide all the gear for the life of the dog. So,
Okay. I'm gonna brag a little too.
yeah,
It was, the video and the idea, the product idea was Chris's.
yeah.
And, so you put it together.
So I don't know. That's about it. I mean, we continue to and will continue to operate and make collars and leashes and whatever we can in Auburn, and always have the community support and appreciate that. So yeah.
How many employees have you got?
Right now, we've only got a couple of full-time and one part-time. Paul comes in and helps out, and Anita, Chris, and myself, and Laura. And so, you know, there's not as many these days, but we still sell throughout the U.S. and internationally. We've got a few dozen customers around the world, Australia, Japan, Korea, England, and various places. Yeah.
Machinery and everything that you use in the plant.
Yeah.
You design something, you test something, you're a designer, and they produce the machinery, what is?
Well, so back in the 70s, all that equipment and everything was still made here in the U.S. Through the 70s and 80s, they basically chased all these businesses out that were all in New England, and unfortunately, a lot of them were bad polluters. And you know, when the EPA started, you know, enforcing all the environmental laws, they chased them out of the U.S. So they went across, you know, to Asia and South America and wherever. Today, most of the equipment that we have is either made in Italy or could be South America, sometimes China. But hardware, leather, and things like that, we buy as much from the U.S. as we're able to. A lot of the old equipment that my grandfather bought we still use. Some of the old United Shoe Machinery Company, it was made in New England. We've still got what's called a creasing machine. We've still got a riveting machine. Sure, we got a couple of other pieces that are that old, but
There's a lot of manual equipment that we have, the old foot presses, and we're using foot action, leg action.
yeah.
We still have a lot of that equipment.
There's machinery that we operate in our shop today that they still make the same way. The only thing that's really changed is maybe the way they power the machine or some of the safety equipment that they might have guarded the machine, so we use their fingers and hands. But we operate it all pretty safe and you know, in all the years we've operated, I guess we've set millions of rivets, and I think 3 times somebody's put a rivet into their hand. Millions of rivets set, so, and nobody lost any limbs in the process. Yeah. What's that?
Sister Kathy.
Yeah, my sister did it once.
I heard that story my whole life.
She likes to talk when she was working, and press the pedal and oops. You got some questions? Yeah.
So what's the difference between Italian leather versus American leather, and are you using like sheep hides or any of the other kinds of?
Mostly what we use is cowhide. There's no real reason to that other than that's mostly what's made. I mean, sheepskin or deer skin or other things that, you know, might be tanned for specific purposes, but cowhide is most suitable for what we do. The tanning business, you know, 100 years ago, there used to be a tannery in every community. But they were fairly bad polluters. And in the 70s, they wiped them all out, and they moved them offshore, and there's literally in the what's called veg tan, which is leather that cowhide like this. If you look at a piece of leather like this, it is natural in color like this. It's typically a veg tan leather, meaning it's tanned with tree barks. You know, if you ever go to the Adirondacks and you see the golden color of the streams, that's the tannins from the rotting vegetation that would have fallen into the river. So, you know, way back when, they may have taken a stagnant area of a stream or something, or a pond, and they would put a hide into it and let it soak into those tannins, and that would preserve the hide. So that's the same process, but this is more, you know, where they use a specific tree that's in Africa, and they make the tannins out of the tree bark. And there's 2 vegetable tanners left in the U.S. out of one. There used to be one in every community. And the tannery that we use is in Curwensville, Pennsylvania, which is down near Punxsutawney, in that area. And they make a beautiful leather. And so all of our bridal leathers and our natural leathers come out of that tannery. The Italian leathers we purchased from a distributor here in the States, which is up in the Buffalo area. They bring it in large volume, and we buy 1 or 2 hides in each color and size at a time.
So how is it different, the Italian, how is it?
Well, just location, really.
Really?
The Italian leathers that we use are actually an upholstery leather. The leathers that video that came up, which was our Tuscany collection of collars and leads, which we make, you know, leads like this. We make collars with and without Swarovski crystals. This is a little poo bag holder that you can clip to the leash and pull your dog waste bags out of. This type of leather is actually a chrome tan leather, and that's tanned with chromium salts and other chemicals. It's a much faster process. Most of your shoes are made from chrome tan leathers. It doesn't have a memory as much of like the veg tan leathers would be used for like a molded couch, because once you molded it, it will remain in that shape.
The leashes all have a ring on them, so you can hang your poop bag holder right from the leash.
You know, so the veg tan leathers and the chrome tan leathers are made pretty much anywhere there's a tannery. They'll do both, and sometimes they'll even do a combination tannage where they'll start the tanning process is a chrome tan leather, and they'll finish it as a veg tan leather. It speeds the process up, but it makes a lower price point. You know, it's really done to cut corners to bring the product to market faster at a lower price. And in doesn't last quite as long as true veg tan leather would. Any other questions?
Have you
Yeah.
folks thought about writing a book?
No. Yeah, maybe at some point, my old age and retirement, I don't know, we'll see. Yeah. Yes, who's that?
I take it that you don't make the leather, you buy the leather.
We buy the leather tan.
Okay, and what about the color, the pretty colors, do you do that?
So, you saw the picture with all the dyes
Yes.
and all that. So, we will take the veg tan leather that comes to us like this, and we'll cut it into blocks of leather. In fact, let me turn the clock back a little bit. When Anita and I bought the family business in '05, we were buying leather from a tannery that has since gone out of business called Westfield Tanning. It was in Westfield, Pennsylvania. Westfield Tanning used to make all of our colored leathers, and they worked with very small quantities, so we were able to buy from them. We could buy 5 hides of one color, 5 hides of another color. And when they went out of business, I called a tannery like Wickett and Craig. Oh, yeah, they're happy to make it for us, but they want 100 hides at a time, and per color. And it's like, I could never buy that quantity. So, this literally happened within a month of us buying the family business, and on my leather supplier of all the colors that we used was gone. And I had some of the personal contact information for employees of that Westfield Tanning that had gone out of business. And I got connected to the guys that formulated the colors and the dyes and whatnot, and I went and visited them, and they trained me on how to apply the color ourselves, which worked out pretty nice, because instead of buying 14 different colors of leather, we now buy one color of leather, we apply the color as we need it. And we do that part in-house.
So is that put into a vat and then dried?
No, it's actually sprayed on, like with automotive spray guns. We use pneumatic air spray guns, and the colors are formulated specifically for us, so that they're made to hold up for a longer period of time. Because a dog collar, is put through some pretty extreme conditions. The dog will jump into the pool, or jump into the salt water of the ocean, or a pond. Sometimes the collar's left on wet for days on end until the dogs finally dry out, and the customer wants the collar to hold up and still look good. And so we've had our leather paints formulated to withstand some very harsh conditions, and so we put it through the same kind of test that like the upholstery companies might use. They'll put an abrasive test and like an adhesive test and various things that challenge the integrity of the finish.
So other than your website, do you have a local store?
No, we got a few products in the Aristocats and Dogs and Skinny Atlas, and anybody locally is welcome to stop into our shop. Years ago, when Pet Depot was out on Grand Avenue, we had a nice selection of products there. But since there's no local pet store that's privately owned, huh? Well, we do Country Max. For Country Max, we actually produce, that collar that's being passed about.
That is right behind you. The banner.
Oh, the banner.
Okay, the banner right behind you, the Sparky's collars. We produce a line for Country Max under their own brand name, which is Maggie and Duke. And so if you go into the Country Max stores and you see a collar made out of this type of material with the Maggie and Duke line on it, name on it, it's from us. So, yeah.
So how do you think about like new product development and product design when it's not Mackenzie Child?
Sure. Basically, we just come up with ideas. We are constantly scouring the product designs, like in fashion and home interior design and stuff like that, and see things that might work. And it's not
only so much you can do with a strap, you know, and a dog collar. But, you know, we had different kinds of ornaments, we sometimes do different colors, and, oh, yeah, this is one that I came up with a couple years ago. So, I'm sure we've all had a dog that
It was nutty.
pulls and tugs on the end of the leash. And so, this is what we call our combination harness leash. It can be used as a regular leash, clip it to any traditional collar, but you can also convert it to a harness by wrapping it around the girth of the dog behind the front legs. And you tuck the hand loop up through where the snap is fastened. And when the dog pulls, it works like a lasso, but around the dog's chest. So when he pulls, he feels that pressure and he'll back off. And this disc here has 2 layers of rubber, or 2 layers of leather with rubber sewn between it, which we cinch down, that keeps it on the dog so the dog can't back out of it. And so as the dog pulls, he feels that pressure and he'll back off. So it's something I came up
And
with.
they're not choking.
Yeah, takes the pressure off the dog's neck, puts it on the chest. Yeah. And we make it out of, again, trying to utilize raw materials that are local or at least domestic. This cotton rope is woven in South Carolina, and we also use a reflective mountain climbing rope. I don't have here, but it's on our website. And that rope is actually braided by the old wood company down in Marathon, New York. And it has, as we mentioned, our grandfather with the 3M Scotch light. We still use 3M reflectivity in the mountain climbing rope leads that we have. So, anyway, anything else?
Folks, I think these guys have done terrific. Really impressed. I never knew. I knew about Auburn Leathercrafters, of course, but I had no clue what they did. This has been great and what an education for all of us. And kudos for the.
So on your seat, there's a postcard.
Yeah, and the back of
Can't
the
leave
post.
without a sales pitch. Grandpa would be disappointed.
On the back of the postcard is a discount code you can use on our website. And you're all, have a luggage tag, feel free to take it with you. Yep. And, yeah, feel free to come up and take a look at some of these products.